Hi, this is Bobby Rio, co-creator of Unlock Her Legs, and in today's video, I want to talk about the number one way to get a girl hooked on you, and also explain how it's proven by science. So in the 1940s, two researchers named James Old and Peter Milner accidentally discovered how a special area of the brain is the source of our cravings. The researchers implanted electrodes in the brains of mice that enabled the mice to give themselves tiny electric shocks to a small area of the brain called the Nucleus Accubens. Now, the mice quickly became hooked on the sensation, and they'd forego food, water, and they would even run across painful electrified grids for the opportunity to continue pressing the lever that administered these shocks. So a few years later, other researchers started testing the human response to the self-administered stimulus to that same area of the brain, and the results were just as dramatic. The subjects wanted nothing to do but press the brain-stimulating button. Now, over the next few years, researchers continued studying this area of the brain until they made a startling discovery. The startling results showed that the Nucleus Accubens was not activated when the reward was received, but rather in anticipation of it. Listen to that again. The startling results showed that the Nucleus Accubens was not activated when the reward was received, but in anticipation of it. Now, this is important to understanding lust and infatuation and how to get a girl to feel that towards you. The study revealed that what draws us to act is not the sensation we receive from the reward itself, but the need to alleviate the craving for the reward. It's the stress and the desire that compels us. You see, anticipation trumps reward, and that stress and that desire is absolutely necessary to hook a girl. Think about movies for a second. The reward in a movie that we usually crave is either the good guy getting revenge on the bad guy, or the couple finally falling in love, or whatever. Now, the best movies dial up the stress, the tension, and the anticipation to an almost unbearable level that your eyes are glued on the screen. And during that period, your Nucleus Accubens, that pleasure center, is stimulated like crazy. It would be nearly impossible to pull you away from the screen until you find out what happens. You'll hold your piss in for hours just to avoid missing 1 second of the movie because you're hooked. But what happens the second time you watch the same movie? Or the third time? The anticipation, the tension, and the stress is just not quite at the same level because you already know the ending. Everything is now predictable. That pleasure center in your brain, it's just not stimulated at that same level. So let me ask you, you ever have a girl that started off very hot for you? She seemed to be hooked on you, falling for you. And then, bam, after a couple dates, she started pulling back and losing interest. Can you guess what happened? The movie got too predictable too quickly, and all the tension, all the stress, and all the anticipation was relieved too fast, which means that pleasure center, that Nucleus Accubens in her brain, just isn't getting stimulated. And then she starts experiencing the come down. You know, the come down is that moment when you realize it's just not as good as it was. The high has worn off. And it's in that moment her mind starts turning towards another guy who will provide her that tension, that stress, and anticipation she craves. That tension, stress, anticipation. They must all be present before the reward, and they must be continually cycled at unpredictable points. So let me give you a real-world example of unpredictable rewards. Let me explain how this works in the real life. Imagine you're out on a date with a girl. Things go well, and over the course of the week, the two of you have been texting. So the first time you text her, there's massive anticipation when she'll text you back. What she'll say. Will she want to hang out again? So when your phone beeps right away that you've got a new message, your pleasure center is peaked. Now, let's say that over the course of the next week, she responds to your text within a few minutes every time. By the end of the week, that high you get from her response just isn't quite the same as it was. However, imagine Friday comes, you text her, but now it's 3 hours later and she still hasn't responded. Where are your levels of anticipation, stress, and tension now? Probably through the roof. Am I right? So where do guys mess up? They don't provide her any of that anticipation, that stress, or that tension, and she'll never get hooked unless you do. You see, when Rob and I discovered this was the missing ingredient, causing guys to continually lose the girls they really liked. So what we did was we began experimenting with different behaviors and tracking the effect it had on girls. And soon we realized that there were actually 12 specific weapons you can use over and over again to create that tension, that anticipation, and that stress. And you can do it at unpredictable intervals so that she would become hooked. So we figured out a specific sequence to use them in that we call the Scrambler. It basically allows you to keep rewriting that movie so that she gets glued to the screen. And every time she thinks she has you figured out, you pull the rug out from under her and you get her even more hooked. Is this evil? I don't think so. You're giving her what she wants. You're stimulating the pleasure center in her mind. If you were a screenwriter writing a movie, wouldn't you want to pack in as much tension and anticipation as possible? Wouldn't you try to make the movie as least predictable as possible? So why not look at your interactions with women in the same way? Create a movie that will get her hooked, and not the movie that's going to have her flipping channels looking for something more interesting to watch. Remember, it's all a game, and once you figure out the rules, it gets a lot easier to win. So I put together a video for you where I explain how the Scrambler works. And you can click the link below and I will teach you the Scrambler, and I'll also teach you about 4 of the 12 weapons that we talked about. So click the link below and I'll see you at that video.